Thank you, Sister Elena. And welcome, brethren. Welcome to everyone. Happy to see you here. Happy to have all you brethren on the live stream and so on. And we're very thankful, as was said by several people, for the break in the weather. Very happy to see that. And if the trees and the grass could speak, they would be happy too. Yeah. Okay, so our prayer thought, opening thought, is taken from 1 SM 399. There are some who are seeking, always seeking for the goodly pearl, but they do not make an entire surrender of the wrong habits. They do not die to self that Christ may live in them. Therefore, they do not find the precious pearl. They have not overcome unholy ambition and their love for worldly attractions. And there are many people who have a sincere desire to overcome, to find the goodly pearl, to be saved, to do good, to serve the Lord. There are many people who have that desire sincerely, but there are many of those people have not made a decision, a real decision in their life to die to self and to put the Lord first and always in their life. And brethren, it is one of the saddest things to look at these people, because these are the people who almost made it. They were persuaded, and they almost made it, but they don't make it if they continue on not crucifying self. They don't surrender all the way. They retain their unholy ambitions and their love of worldly things. Anything that is of the world and not of Christ, that comes between us and Christ, will be enough to cause us to lose out. Many, many good brethren, and you look at them and you talk to them, and they are good people. But there's something about them that they just were not able to let go. They weren't able to make that final surrender of the world and their ambitions and their hopes and dreams, not only for themselves but their family, their children. They want to see their children be doctors and lawyers and this and that. All of these are unholy ambitions that come from the love of the world. So I see this as the saddest situation, similar to the rich young man. The rich young man had everything going for him, except he could not pay the price in the end. And so there are many of us in this situation. Let's hope that we don't stay in this situation, that we are able to see ourselves, we are able to understand the importance of and value things rightly, the importance of the things of the Lord, and the importance of the things of the world. One is trivial, though it's immediate in our face, and one is eternal, and it might seem far away because we are far away from the Lord. But as we draw closer to Him, we will see that these things are the important things, and we will make that commitment to crucify self. Self must die in order for us to actually live eternal life with Christ. So interesting, seeming paradox there, but true, as we all know. So our subject is dying to self in order that we have eternal salvation. We do have to die to self. And self is all the things that we hold as dear to ourselves, important to us, that are not approved by God, that are not part of the things that he wants us to do. Any and every good gift that we should have is not part of self. The Lord has given us the opportunities and to have many good gifts, good experiences. All of these things are not part of self, but self is the negative things. It is the things that separate us from each other to make us want unfair share. Children who want to take two parts, two sets of things, and leave none for their playmate, as it were. This is self. And it is also all those things that cause us to take advantage of other people in other ways. It is the things that separate us from God, too. And the things that we place first between us and God. And that's why self is so dangerous, because it comes in the end between us and God. It's something that we are willing to value higher than our nearness to God. And we all know this, brethren. There's not one thing that we will hear tonight that we don't know, but I hope it will be an encouragement nevertheless. We know that we cannot have these things between us and the Lord. And yet, because he is good and merciful and forgives us, and we presume on his goodness and mercy to continue with these things. Each one of us here tonight, if we knew that this night was our last night on earth, would get rid of self for tonight. Yes, we would, brethren. We would get right with the Lord, and we would drop self and all those things. We would crucify self instantly to be right with the Lord, because we know that we cannot be saved with these things. We have aught against each other. We have things in our heart that we don't want to get rid of. We have ambitions that are not approved of the Lord. The Lord doesn't tell us what we have to do. He allows us to do whatever. So we can have our own ambitions, our own desires and dreams and so on, but we know in our heart what should come first. The Lord and the work should come first. We here are all dedicated workers, and that's good, except that we still have self, brethren. We haven't got rid of all the self. But every Davidian everywhere is a worker for the Lord. Every brother and sister everywhere in the world needs to see that they're working first for the Lord. They're putting the Lord's things first. And as we all do that, the Lord will bless us individually, and he will bless the work in a way that we have not seen. Amazing Grace 2:23. Let us not spare ourselves, but carry forward in earnest the work of reform that must be done in our lives. Let us crucify self. Unholy habits will clamor for the mastery, but in the name and through the power of Jesus we may conquer. To him who daily seeks to keep his heart with all diligence, the promise is given, neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is Jesus Christ our Lord. Now, none of these things can separate us from the love of God, but self can, and it does. We are instructed to crucify self. This is a crucifixion, a death of self from which there's no resurrection, or there should be no resurrection. Self does need to be put to death. And we'll itemize some things about self, but we understand what self is. Self is me, mine, what I want. All the things that I want that are not sanctioned by God, that are not part of the things that He wants me to want, part of the things that are that go toward the furtherance of the work and bringing me and others closer to the Lord. All these things are self. We have a lot of self still, all of us. You must die to self, crucify self, gain the victory over self. You cannot be a true follower of Christ unless you take hold of this work resolutely. Now, we do have self, brethren. Step on your toes and you will see self in the feelings that come up. We all have self. And here we are hearing that we cannot be a true follower of Christ unless we get rid of self, unless we work very hard to get rid of self. This is potentially a very troubling condemnation of us all, because we all have self still, but we want to be followers of Christ. We call ourselves followers of Christ, but we are followers of Christ with a large burden of self. It needs to stop. We need to let go of self. This is true humility, by the way. Humility is not crawling on the floor. Humility is crucifying self and not having that self and pride in you that gets offended, that gets up on its, rears up in indignation when someone steps on your toes, someone otherwise transgresses in your life and offends you in some way. If self is dead, you don't rise up in unrighteous indignation. Now, sometimes we think it's righteous indignation. They should never have done that. They presumed they had no right, blah, blah, blah. All that could be true, but we also have no right to have self rising up in unrighteous indignation on these things. There's never a reason for self to be offended, a godly reason. So unless we gain the victory over self, unless we work to do this, we cannot be a true follower of Christ. The attributes of the character of Christ can be imparted to those only who distrust themselves. Now, to distrust yourself is to know that on your own you're going to fail. We're going to fail whatever it is. If we think that we stand, then we have set ourselves up to fall. Distrust yourself in the sense that we know that without God's help, we are going to fall into sin. Self is going to get the victory once again. And distrust yourself, and then knowing that you have this weakness, this problem, and so on, go to the Lord and walk with the Lord constantly on this. And as we go step by step with the Lord, never taking our hand out of His hand, reminding ourselves constantly, we have a self problem. Okay, we have a self problem. We can't forget that. And as we remember that, as we go to the Lord with that, He will help us step by step, and victory by victory, we will be eliminating self. Self does need to be crucified. It is crucified by being put to death, item by item, extinguished. We have to extinguish all of that type of behavior. Do not have your feelings on your fingertips. So this is one of the prime ways that we want to crucify self. We don't want our feelings on our fingertips. We don't want our feelings anywhere near to where they can be bruised and offended and so on. Are you one of those who are ever getting self in the way and taking exception at much or little, giving expression to the inevitable hurt of ever exposed feelings, or giving vent to an abusive, unholy temper? All of these things are self. very objectionable manifestations of self. And in one way or another, brethren, I don't believe any of us are beyond being offended. We are still at the level where we can be hurt. Our ever-exposed feelings can be hurt. So our feelings have to get to the point where they cannot be hurt, that we cannot be offended. And we value ourselves wrongly. You've said that to me? Is that, do you know who you're speaking to? And blah, blah, and so on. We value ourselves too highly in a wrong way. And that's why we get offended. We value our feelings. You hurt my feelings. Okay? Yes, well, maybe they did hurt your feelings, but don't value your feelings that highly. Don't value them at all. Nothing that happens to any of us can ever equal what the Lord went through. Okay? He went through more pain and suffering and shame for us than we can ever imagine. We don't have anything to be hurt about. And as we are hurt to begin with, we need to let it go. We need to find out from the Lord, how can we do this? How can we get to a point where we are indifferent about our feelings? We do have to do that. We have to get to the point where we can meet the slings and arrows of the world with a peaceful mind that is not offended, that is not troubled by these things. Imagine one of the apostles being abused and abused and condemned and cursed and so on. We might partly exempt Paul, because we know that Paul was slightly offended with the high priest when in the examination. But he apologized when he saw that it was the high priest. But imagine the apostles, by and large, they understood the teachings of the Lord. They would take the abuse. They did not come back at their accusers, at their abusers. And that's how we have to be. We have to be at peace with them. We have to be able to take the things that are thrown at us and not react. Literally not react. It's not a matter of willpower here. It's a matter of learning not to care about these things. It's a matter of crucifying self so self doesn't exist on these things. The feelings of self, the sensitivities, simply have been extinguished. It is because men do not now have that spirit that their personal feelings are so easily hurt for any little thing done against them. And this is the spirit that the Lord wants us to have and that we are working now to develop. And since the Spirit of grace causes no one to mourn, since the Spirit of grace causes one to mourn, not for self, it is understandable that to pity oneself and to be hurt over what others do or say against him is a sure sign that rather than being imbued with the Spirit of grace, he is imbued with the spirit of the devil. Now, brethren, this is a slap-in-the-face statement. It's a wake-up statement. Think about this. If we are hurt, we don't have the Spirit of God in us. If we are offended, if we are troubled, if we are mourning for self, we don't have the Spirit of grace. We are imbued with the spirit of the devil, who is daily seeking to discourage and dishearten by pitying self. Remember that self-pity is outright self-defeat. Very wise, very true. And self-pity is self. It's self running wild, feeling sorry for ourselves. We cannot have self-pity. Never, ever should we have self-pity. We have pity for others, But if we have self-pity for ourselves, it is a self-defeat. And even worse, it is manifesting the spirit of the devil. Now, this is what the message teaches, and I hope we all understand these things must be taken as literally true. Okay, we don't take it with a grain of salt. We don't want to have the spirit of the devil. We want to have the right spirit, the spirit of grace. Many professed Christians do not labor perseveringly. They make too little effort and are not ready and willing to deny self. Perseveringly, brethren, we must persevere. We must continue. We must start, and then tomorrow we must continue, and then we must continue the next day, and the next day, and the next day. It is only by this continuous effort that we will overcome. Those who start and stop and start and stop, they're not going to overcome at that rate, ever. Those who make an effort and then slip back and then make a step forward and a step back, they're not ever going to overcome either. It is necessary for us to labor perseveringly and to make progress daily. We have to have victories on the way. We are not here to have defeats on the way. Continuous defeats will never get us to where we're supposed to be. We'll just be defeated there at the end. Let all be taught that they are to bear burdens and to deny natural inclination. Let them learn the blessedness of working for Christ, following him in self-denial, and enduring hardness as good soldiers. Let them learn to trust his love and to cast on him their cares. Let them taste the joy of winning souls for him. In their love and interest for the lost, they will lose sight of self. And this is a great secret. When you interest yourself in others, you have put up a psychological and spiritual barrier to self. It's a real thing. And the Lord will bless us. As we do good for others, it is a law of the universe that we will be blessed even more than those that we help. If you are saving people, if you're engaged in winning souls, you are engaged in the most important, the greatest work possible, and you will receive the greatest blessings possible. The Lord will bless you. And it is important that each of us learn these things, that we be willing to follow him in self-denial. Self-denial is something that is somewhat alien to us by and large, certainly in the Western world, but I think in lots of places. Self-denial, by the way, doesn't mean flagellating ourselves with a whip. It doesn't mean starving ourselves for nutritious food, but self-denial is real nevertheless. God's people don't talk about self-denial. Self-denial is a part of their daily life, real self-denial. How can we, who are blessed in the way that we are blessed, not deny ourselves when we know that millions are going into eternity every year unsaved? That should be in the back of our minds always, brethren, because the sins of the world lay at the door of the church. Us, we're the wheat in the church, or at least in theory. So, self-denial means if I can do something, or let me say this, if I cannot do something, if I can deny myself in some way that has a positive blessing to someone else, I will do that. We will do that. Why do we really need the extra pair of shoes, the new clothes, do we really need some of the things, the food, the desserts and so on that we get, brethren? We know that we don't, okay? It's not even good for us. But as we are doing that, we are losing an opportunity for self-denial. We're losing an opportunity for a blessing, and we are losing the opportunity to help other people. But we take it for granted. I worked, it's me, it's mine, I deserve it, and I'm going to have it. And that is the way self operates in the Western world, in the American mind. Yes, it is. But it's not the way it should work for us. We should be looking to see how little we can live on, not how little we can give. We need to be able to endure hardness and self-denial. We need to be able to live our life in the way that Christ did. We're following Christ. He had nowhere to lay his head. Now, we are blessed. We have some place to lay our head. Okay, so that's good. We don't have to deliberately be homeless and so on. To do that is presumption. But there's much that we can do in the area of self-denial, brethren. Much. Okay, this is our closing thought. Strive earnestly for unity. Pray for it, work for it. It will bring spiritual health, elevation of thought, nobility of character, heavenly mindedness, enabling you to overcome selfishness and evil surmising, and to be more than conquerors through him that loved you and gave himself for you. Crucify self. Now, the reason that she shifts to crucify self is that one of the big reasons for not having unity is self. I want something, you want something, we clash, and we diverge. We have different views, and my view must prevail over your view. And if your view is not accepted, you must cast me out or go out yourself, and so on. This is how self operates in reality, historically too. We do need to crucify self, each one of us, if we're going to have unity. Esteem others better than yourselves. Now, what does this mean? This is worthy of deep meditation on, brethren. Esteem others better than yourselves. This is one of the things that most Christians are hypocrites about. If you say, do you esteem others better than yourselves? A lot of Christians will be tempted to say yes, because they know they're supposed to say yes. It's like, do you love your brother and sister? Do you love your brother and sister? Okay, so don't say it, brethren. We don't want to be hypocrites ourselves. When we say we love our brothers and sisters, what does that mean? It means that we are willing to give our lives for our brothers and sisters. It means that we are willing to let go of all our life, our current life, and go out and work and work hard to save our brothers and sisters. That's what it means to love our brothers and sisters. So the problem here many Christians have is they do not esteem others better than ourselves. And brethren, I think it's almost universal. Once we do esteem others better than ourselves, do you know what that means? It means that you are a saint. And you are going to be saints. Saints, every single one of us who are sealed. But as we are not sealed yet, we are not, and we need to be saints before we are sealed. Don't think it goes the other way. But we are not saints and we're not sealed, and we have a little bit of time, but this is what the Lord wants us to do. He wants us to be so kind and loving and treat others so well that it would look to others that we esteem them better than ourselves. Thus, you will be brought into oneness with Christ. And this is the conditions for the second Pentecost. There are real conditions that must be met. We must meet individually. Before the heavenly universe and before the church and the world, you will bear unmistakable evidence that you are God's sons and daughters. God will be glorified in the example that you set. As God is glorified in us, people will be drawn to us, drawn to Him. Just our example will cause people to stop, look, wonder, ask questions, come closer. And so we do need to have this genuine Christianity in our life, in this level. It can't be pretended just on Sabbath. It doesn't work like that. It's a 7-day, 24-hour requirement. It is, as we really have this, it's unmistakable. It's not going to be faked, but as it really starts to develop, it will set people back on their feet, brethren. It's like those people, there's some wonderful people up there. And worldwide, there will be a buzz. Those Davidians are wonderful, amazing people. We may not agree with all their ideas and their self-denial and so on, but they are wonderful people. And it will get notice. It will be noticed by good people. Other people will be attracted to these things as they are seen in us. So God has a system for us to follow. He has a good way for us to go. As we move in this way, as we crucify self, and it's a final death of self that we are talking about, item by item, facet by facet of self. As we do these things and we move in this way, God will be glorified by the example that we are setting in our life, and the work, brethren, will move with power and force as we know it will. And we know it's to be, and it will happen. So this is the way we are lined up to do the work, to accomplish the work the Lord has given us. But it does come down to each one of us individually. As we decide that, you know what, this is something I'm really going to actually work on. This is something I'm going to meditate on. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to plan about it. And then I'm going to start doing it. We're not going to have self-denial campaigns and things to tell people. We don't want to hear testimonies, especially what you denied, what self is denied and so on. But we want you, between you and God, to know what is going on in your own life. And there is much that we must do here, brethren. Much we must do, and we have a very little time if we're going to be ourselves the people that God uses to finish the work. Let's be that people, brethren. God bless you.